And we're back. Hello and welcome back to the June Made channel. My name is Paula Jean, and this is a channel where I share about some of the stuff that I make, mostly garment sewing, occasionally home decor, DIY stuff, but I am just coming back from a very unintentional 4-month hiatus from posting on here. Had some tough things happen in the late spring, and I ended up going through a big period of grief and dealing with some mental health things, and I haven't really wrapped my head around how much I want to share about that on here, but suffice to say that while I did very much fulfill the kind of mandate statement on my Instagram page that says that I sew things to stay sane when my other things go off the rails, and I sewed a lot this summer, so I'll let you do the math on that. Yeah, I'm very fortunate to have an amazing husband and a really great support system. So while I was able to take pictures and post some things on Instagram, I every time I pulled out my camera equipment to film, I would just get overwhelmed and really felt like I just needed my sewing hobby and practice to be very therapeutic and creative for me, and not worry about output and production so much. But I really want to thank everybody for who watched my older videos and sent really nice messages and comments and things like that. So thanks very much for that. Like I said, I did sew a lot, and I may do like a little sewing roundup just to share some of the projects that I did here. But in the meantime, I kind of wanted to get the ball rolling with a pattern review of my most recent pattern test, just to kind of grease the gears a little. So today I'm going to be sharing with you about my most recent project, which was testing for LAWREN of Elbe Textiles. She is an Australian pattern designer, and this one is the Gibbons Slip Dress. So a bit of info about the pattern. The Gibbons Slip Dress is a sleeveless bias cut dress. It has an A-line underbust seam with some underbust gathers. There are 2 different front necklines, 2 different back necklines, and also a couple of length options. There are also different bodice pieces for B cups and CD cups. It comes in her full extensive size range, and she uses the sizing labels A through N. One of the front necklines is a simple deep V. The other is a slightly gentler V that has buttons and rouleau button loops. In the back, you have the choice of a V back or a rounded scoop back, and there are cutting lines on the pattern for just above the knee and for the mid calf. This pattern is really great for your light to mid-weight drapey wovens, so like rayon challis or tencel, silk, cupro. You could even do a linen or a linen blend that has a little bit more drape to it. The neckline and the armholes are stabilized with a very, very thin knit fusible stay tape, which this was the first time that I used something like this, and I loved it. I'm going to be using this on definitely all my bias pieces, but probably use it to stabilize a lot more than that in the future, just because it's just so easy to use, and I found it was a little bit better than just stay stitching. And then the neck and armholes are finished with a bias binding, and I believe that LAWREN is, by the time this video is going up, I think she's going to have a couple of videos on her YouTube channel for the bias binding and some other tips on sewing a bias dress. So I'll look those up and leave those linked in the description box of this video. One note, if you decide to check out this pattern, and I highly suggest that you do, LAWREN did make a few little minor changes to the final pattern between the end of testing and the release of the pattern based on our feedback. So when I made my muslin, I found that I was using the CD cups, and I needed to add a little bit of length in the bodice piece, and I also did kind of a Wild West version of a sway back adjustment. I wouldn't be sharing it on here because I think it was a freak accident that it ended up working out for me. But I don't think it's the proper way to do it for this style of garment. But LAWREN had added afterwards 2 fisheye darts in the back that are optional. So if you end up needing or wanting those to kind of adjust the fit of your waist and torso in the back, those are available as well. So for my final version, I did the button front V-back long length, and as I mentioned, I used the CD cups. The fabric that I used was a remnant that I got at the beginning of the summer and the late spring. I picked it up at Joann's when I was on a Notion run, and it was actually this pre-sheared fabric, and I liked the color and the weight of it, and so I brought it home, and usually remnants are 1 yard or less. But when I got it home and I unwrapped it, I didn't realize that when they take the measurements of that kind of fabric, it's at the sheared end, which makes sense if you think about it. But I had seen a video that Casey over at Pattern Scout had posted many, many months ago, that she had this sheared fabric and she just took out the shearing stitching to expand to the full dimensions of the fabric. So I decided to try that, and it was the easiest thing in the world. This pre-sheared fabric that I got, it was done with a chain stitch. So I just snipped the end of the stitching line, pulled it all out, and like in under 3 minutes, I had all of the shearing out of this piece of fabric. And when I washed and dried and pressed it, I ended up having almost 2.5 yards of like 57-inch fabric. So I ended up with enough to do this midi length bias cut dress and have some scraps left over. So don't overlook those pre-sheared fabrics and think that they're only meant for one thing. So I highly recommend you check those out. Now, the reason I'm not sharing very many photos or not a lot of footage of this final version that I did is because I'm not done with it. I've decided to do some other things of this. I'm really happy with the fit and how everything turned out. It's a great pattern. I love the instructions. Yeah, I just really like LAWREN's drafting. But I think that I'm going to end up getting a lot more wear out of this if I make some changes to it. And so I decided to make that kind of the focus of this video, is how I got from my final test of the pattern to my final version of the pattern. So let's get into that now. So here's what we have going on. I made this lovely Gibbons Slip Dress by Elbe Textiles, and as much as I love this color, obviously it's in my whole room, it doesn't look good on me. It kind of washes me out. So I'm gonna go ahead and dye this black. I don't have a black casual dress, so I think I'm gonna try that. And how I'm gonna do that, because this is a linen viscose blend, and as far as I know, anyway, it was a remnant I got at Joann's, so they don't always label their stuff correctly, but I'm gonna assume that that's correct. So this is a natural fiber, but I did use matching thread, so I want that to dye as well. So I did some research online, and apparently with the Jacquard eye dye, they have an eye dye poly and an eye dye for natural fabrics, and you can combine these two in the same dye bath in order to dye all of the fibers that are in here. So this is what I'm going to try. I am going to remove the iridescent buttons because I don't know how the dye is going to affect those, and I do want to maintain that iridescent quality on these, so I'm just going to take these off and I'll sew them back on after. So I've got that, and then while I've got a black dye bath going, I've also got these what used to be white cotton canvas sneakers. These are Cariumas, which I really like, but I've discovered that I am not a white cotton canvas sneaker gal. I walk a ton in all kinds of conditions, and they get dirty. So I think if I'm ever going to have a pair of white sneaks, they need to be like leather or leather-like, like something that I can clean a lot easier, because I tried to wash these and they did not fare well. So I'm going to go ahead and dye these as well. Now, these are cotton canvas, and I've seen a lot of dyeing on the online where people do dye their cotton canvas shoes and they tape off the rubber so that no dye gets on those, and they use a dye for natural fabrics. But because I've got both kinds of dye going in this dye bath, And I don't know what the content of rubber or synthetic is on this, kind of white part here. Carium is a company that is big on sustainability, so it might well react like a natural fiber, but there might also be some other composite in there that doesn't dye. So I'm just going to try to throw these in like this. Maybe it will turn like gray and black, which I'm not against. That'll be kind of cool. Or maybe it'll just fail and these will just become like kicking around housework shoes. I don't know. But I'm going to try it. Well, that was fun. And I'm quite happy with the results. So the polyester thread dyed pretty well. It's a little bit lighter than the regular black, but I don't mind it at all. And you can kind of see what it did here, these little threads that I left from where my buttons were. Not a bad job at all. And something really cool happened down at the hem. So I had already let this hang before I had done any of this dyeing stuff. And look at this cool fringe that happened. And I really like it, so I think I'm not going to hem this. I'm just gonna do like a little zigzag stitch around the top of that fringe, and I'm gonna let the hem be that, because I'm going for a more casual look with this dress anyway. And I also have another idea for some possible embellishment. I've got my tiny little Tickle trunk of trims here, which is just a plastic box with a bunch of trims and ribbons that I've collected over time. And I actually have a few options for embellishment here. The first of which is this cool kind of abstract corded rosette trim. Now this is black, so it would be black on black, which would add more of a textural element. So not something that you would notice from far away, but if you were standing right next to me, you might look at it and go, oh, isn't that cute? Or whatever. I like this. I think it would look really nice along the stitching line around the neck and the armhole, maybe the underbust seam. I do think that it would take it possibly more into kind of nightgown adjacent, lingerie adjacent feeling, which I'm not against. I wear lingerie as regular clothes a lot. In fact, I'm wearing actually the LAWREN bodysuit. This is a lingerie pattern by Madeline, and I wear this as a top all the time. So that's not an issue. So that's an option. Another option is this really cool braided, it's a suede braid in the center of this slightly shinier woven trim. I think I picked this up in Toronto at a trim store on like Queen West or something. It caught my eye because it has this slightly Western feel, but also kind of reminded me of Art Deco styling. I don't know why, I'm probably way off base on that, but I do really like it. I think it would also look nice along the neckline and the armhole, and it would be more of a commitment, and it might change the vibe of the dress a little bit more, and I think I would probably have to use different buttons because I don't think those iridescent buttons would go very well with this. But, possibility. Don't know if it's a probability. And the last one that I have is this gorgeous wide woven trim. And this is actually what popped into my head when I first thought, oh, I might want to embellish this dress a little bit. So I don't know where I got the trim, but it was I sewed it onto a long brown knit maxi dress that I had that had a center back seam, and I never loved how the center back seam looked. And so I got this trim to sew onto the seam just for some interest in the back. And that dress got all like stretched out, worn out, and I recycled it into something else. But I took off the trim because I was just so in love with it, and I knew I would want to use it on something else. So because this is so wide and because the design is so bold, I think I would only use this on that inverted triangle underbust seam. I think it would look really pretty. I think it would highlight those little bust gathers that are under there. Also because it's got these really lovely colors in the center. There's like a purple and a blue and a bit of a green. So I think it would pick up on the iridescence of those buttons really nicely. And I also think that it would coordinate really well with that little tiny fringe of a hem that's going on at the bottom. So I think I have effectively convinced myself that this is the winner. I think I'm gonna get so much wear out of this dress over many, many seasons. It feels sexy because it's got that bias slinkiness to it, but the look is kind of more elevated casual. It looks good with sandals, with boots, and you could also easily cut this off to make it a camisole style top. You could also cut off just the skirt part and have a great bias cut skirt pattern. And I was also thinking, because it's October and so Halloween is at the end of the month, so if you're going to any kind of a themed party where the theme is like 20s, you could easily use this pattern to make up a nice dress, get some of that like long fringe, tack it on under the bust. And like, for example, I was digging around in my jewelry box and I found this brooch that I have. You could like stick that on a headband and then you're kind of good to go. So anyway, lots of possibilities with this pattern. Very, very versatile. Thank you so much for joining me on this video. First video back after a long hiatus. And oh, wait. You probably want to see the shoes. I forgot about the shoes. Hang on. Not bad at all. What I thought would happen did happen. So the rubber kind of died a little unevenly, but I still think that they look way better than they did. And I did end up having to switch out the shoelaces because the shoelaces actually dyed weirdly a different color than the rest of the shoe. But I'm actually pretty happy with these, and it's nice to be able to like wear them out in public again. So mission accomplished. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one.